Hi, Rick, Tanner Systems. This video is going to really cover a lot of the information for the Tri-Fluid Injector Tanner system. What is the Tri-Fluid Injector system? That is what we have created and what we can offer to anyone who has a large consumption air system in our, anything over 1,000 c.f.m. and in air lines that are 4 inches and larger. We can make a small adaptation to get into a 3-inch air line, but we really need the c.f.m. and we'll cover that for a reason later. So if you think that's something that might work for you in your system, then continue to watch and we'll talk about really what this does for you. What is a tri-fluid injector? Well, just as the name says, it is designed to introduce any of Tanner Systems' 3 antifreeze compounds or 3 antifreeze fluids into your system, either TANNERGAS, NO-TOX 2, or Frosto. Frosto is still being made by Tanner Systems, even though we no longer manufacture the Frosto electric vaporizer. That was discontinued in 2006, but it's a great unit. Still plenty of them in the field. If you happen to have a Frosto unit and you also have a tri-fluid injector, you have the ability to just keep one fluid on hand and you can pump Frosto either in your Frosto vaporizer or your Tanner TFI. But if you only have TFIs in your system, we recommend you either stay with the NO-TOX or TANNERGAS. So again, what does this tri-fluid injector do? It uses an electric motor to power a diaphragm pump. The diaphragm pump then is a metered diaphragm pump. We can adjust its flow or its pump rate, and we're going to run that through a tube to a quill. That quill is going to get installed in your airstream, and that's where our antifreeze gets introduced to your compressed air, which contains moisture. Our antifreeze mixes with your moisture molecules. We know that chemically, when we add antifreeze to water, we change the freeze point of that water, and now, based on which fluid you're using at Tanner Systems, your moisture is now going to freeze at either -40 down to as much as -70 and still continue to operate your air system without the headaches of freeze-up. So how exactly do we work? Again, the motor, this one that we put on the tri-fluid injector is a explosion-proof 3rd horsepower motor that will run off of either 110 or 220. You don't need to pre-specify that when you order it. This one can get wired in any direction. There is, you can't see it back here, but there is a weatherproof housing for those connections that we do provide for you. You will need to provide your own power source on-off switch because there are so many out there that doesn't make sense for us. The motor then goes to the pump. The pump will draw fluid from the lower reservoir, and again, we will eventually go to your air stream. Where do I install my tri-fluid injector? We obviously, the tri-fluid injector is designed to treat your entire system's air. We're not just doing some spot treatments with the tri-fluid injector like we might do with some of our compact dispensers. So obviously after your compressor, and then preferably after your dryer or after your receiver, because those 2 pieces of equipment are going to work against us by pulling moisture out of your system. If we've treated your moisture with our antifreeze, but then your dryer or your receiver tank take those back out, we're working against each other. So put us after your dryer, after your receiver. And then mainly in a spot that is protected from the elements if possible. They can work outside, but let's keep the rain and the snow off of the equipment. It's just going to operate that much better. And a place where you can service it. You are going to need to fill it up, obviously, view how much fluid is in it, turn it on, turn it off, all those things. You don't want to have some access to it. So once you figure out where you're going to install it, what kind of things do I need to do to, as you might say, what do I need to install it? So we do provide, like I said, all the fittings that you see here. I'm going to supply you with some tubing to get some pad air to you, and then to get from the pump to the quill. We'll talk about that in a second. You are going to need a 1/4 inch pipe coupler. You're going to weld that into your air stream to accept this fitting, which is just a ball valve and a compression fitting for the tubing. This is for what we call pad air. We're going to run some pad air from your source to the tank. So right down here is a regulator and fitting. The regulator is going to take your compressed air at whatever it is, 115, 120, 150. We're going to regulate it down to 5 psi so that the air in the tank, we don't need any more than that. We put pad air in the tank, which is going to help the pump that much easier. We put 5 psi in the tank. That's going to push down on the fluid. At the bottom of the tank, obviously, is where the outlet is. It's going to come up this tube to the bottom of the tank here, and then to the bottom of the pump right here. And that's just going to allow that to A, prime that much faster, and then B, pump that much easier because it doesn't have to draw any fluid. We're going to push the fluid right to the bottom of the pump. So that's the first thing you need to install. The second thing you will then install is a 1/2-inch coupler at your injection point. So where are we going to put the fluid into your main air stream? So you're going to put a 1/2-inch coupler in there. That is going to accept this coil. We're either going to install it at maybe a 60-degree angle in this manner or this manner, depending on how your pipe is running towards me. And then you're also going to install this slant into the direction of the airflow. That's going to allow your air to take these little pulses of antifreeze and break them up into small particles. The smaller these particles get, the more effective they're going to be. We don't want any of these pulses of fluid to just fall into the bottom of your pipe and lay there. They're not going to do either one of us any good. So that's what you're going to need to do for couplings. You're obviously going to, like I said, talk about getting us a power source for this motor. We are going to need a couple of anchors to anchor this thing to the floor somehow. And then lastly, one thing we want you to do is these 2 plastic red caps, along with a red cap on the back here of the gearbox reservoir, are just shipping caps. I've supplied for you vented caps that we want you to use once the motor and gearbox are put into operation. So replace those caps before you get started. So once we figured out where we're going to put it, we've kind of got it installed. We're going to fill it with fluid. I give you a 45 here. If you want to put a 90, that will work too, but put your fluid in here, cap it off. Now we can start putting, in essence, pressure into the system. So again, the 1/4-inch fitting is going to bring some tubing down. We're going to go into right here next to the regulator. We're going to open the regulator ball valve. That's now going to pressurize the tank. So as soon as we've got pressure in the tank, and just for redundancy, for a little safety measure, I do have a 10 psi pop-off on this side. So should something fail, we get a little too much pressure build up in here, your pop valve is going to release over there, so we don't have to worry about putting too much pressure in here. However, this is a 200 psi ASME certified welded tank, so we just are err on the side of caution here. Pressure in the tank. Once we know that we've got pressure, we've got fluid, we are going to open this valve. Once we open this valve, you are going to have your 5 psi air quickly push the fluid right to the bottom of the pump and through the pump, and it's going to come out this. So keep an eye on this. It's going to happen really quickly. As soon as you get fluid to the diaphragm, close this valve. This valve is closed. Now we can start our motor. Once the pump starts operating, we can open this valve. You're going to start to see fluid pass through this sight glass. There's a little ball in here. This little ball is going to surge every time the diaphragm has a complete stroke. Once we start to see fluid passing through the sight glass, now you can go to the coil ball valve, open the valve next to the coil, and we now have fluid pumping into your system. Now that we've got fluid pumping, how much do you need? Great question. I'm going to recommend that we start with roughly 1 pint of fluid for every 1,000 CFM that you think you are consuming per hour. So 1 pint per 1,000 CFM per hour is where I think we should start. You're going to obviously need to kind of do some trial and error as far as what best suits your application. You may get to the point where you say, I don't quite have enough, I've still got a few areas of freeze up. This pump is fully adjustable, so go to the pump and either increase or decrease your percentage of work capacity or your stroke 100% is going to produce roughly 0.86 gallons per minute. That's what this pump, or I'm sorry, 0.86 gallons per hour is what this diaphragm pump is rated at 100%. So if we think you need to pump less, roll the knob upwards. Pump's going to work at a lower percentage rate. It's going to pump less fluid. On the sight tube that hangs in front, 1 inch of that sight tube is approximately 1 gallon. So if you put a little mark on there with a piece of tape maybe, run it for a couple of hours, you can come back and kind of see how much fluid did I just put into my system based on your compressor, what you think you're going to consume. Then you can kind of adjust from there. The pump does have an internal pressure relief mechanism. It is set from the factory at 250 psi, more than enough for any of your applications. Should something, if you want to say, not work the way you want it to, maybe a ball valve somewhere didn't get opened and all of a sudden we built up too much pressure and then the pump shut itself off, it's still going to run, it just won't pump any fluid anymore. Turn everything off, let it sit for a couple minutes, turn it back on, it should reset. Do not go in and adjust any of the pressure relief adjustments unless you have over 250 psi. Because if you do, then we'll be talking real soon if you start making too many adjustments with that. So leave it where it is. It really shouldn't have to be adjusted. If you do have that high pressure and you think this is a pump that'll work for you, give us a call. We'll talk through how to make those adjustments based on your specific air pressure needs. So we talked about install, where to install. We talked about filling it. We talked about setting it. If you do have a 3-inch airline, but you think you're still putting out that 1,000 plus c.f.m. and you think this is still going to work for you, the only thing that you're going to need to do is take this quill and shorten it a little bit, because you're going to be putting all of this into a 3-inch airline. We want the tip of this quill right in the middle of your pipe. So this is a little long, so you're going to need to just take a little of this quill off, and then you can probably make it work in your 3-inch airline. We do have charts for you that are going to come in your instructions that can help you guide you with consumption rates. Troubleshooting, there isn't really a whole lot outside of what we just discussed as far as, geez, Rick, I don't know what we did wrong, but I'm still not pumping fluid. We kind of have to start at the basics. Obviously, do we have the proper amount of fluids in all of our reservoirs? Do I have enough fluid in my diaphragm reservoir? Do I have enough fluid in my gearbox for everything to be working properly? Should you need to add fluids to any of these, the diaphragm reservoir uses an EP50 grade fluid. The gear reservoir is a 150 grade hydraulic fluid or oil. They are not interchangeable, so don't put the 50 from the diaphragm reservoir into the gearbox and vice versa. I do supply a little bit of the 50 for you should any of this leak out during transit. But if you do need either of those fluids, I'm quite positive that any of your industrial distributors that you work with can get those fluids for you. Another thing that may work, so we want to have fluid in the reservoirs. We need to make sure that we have the proper pad air. So again, check all of your valves. We've got the ball valve on the incoming air. We've got the ball valve here at the tank. We've got another ball valve here and another one at the quill. We got to make sure that all of those are open. Otherwise, the pump is just going to be pumping and nothing's going to flow. And then we obviously need to make, one last thing to probably look at would just be all of our check valves. We've got a check valve here, one on top of the pump. We have another check valve between the sight glass and the pump. Make sure they're all installed properly in the right direction, as well as, unfortunately did a check valve fail. And then one of the last things would be, is my diaphragm damaged? The only way to know that would be to remove the faceplate and physically inspect your diaphragm. It's a white Teflon diaphragm. It's going to be wavy, that's fine, but if it happens to be torn, then we're going to need to replace that diaphragm. We have them at Tanner Systems, and you can get them through your dealer. How do I know if my diaphragm is torn? Another way to know is just literally, if you take this red inspection cap off, you'll probably see a combination of the two fluids between my antifreeze and your gear oil right here in the reservoir. And that would be another way to see, hey, is my diaphragm torn? Drain valves to know when the proper amount is. Another way that I like to look at, do I have enough fluid underneath one of these caps? Not the one with the adjusting screw, but the other one, there's a screen underneath there. And when the pump is running, I want the fluid to come right up to the bottom of that screen after every stroke. And then you know that, okay, I've got the proper amount of fluid in here. I can do that without taking anything apart. I don't have to open any of these valves and have fluid drain out. I can just open the cap, look at the screen, the fluid, the fluid will come up to that bottom of that screen as the pump is operating. So those are, I think, all the things that we can really cover now. If you've gone through all of those, something is just not quite working right, give us a call at Tanner Systems. We'll walk through it with you. We'll make sure that we didn't miss anything. There is a little bit more information on the website. I have all the instructions, filling information, installation information in the packet that we provided at the time that we sent it out. If it got lost, contact us. We can get another copy to you. That's not a big deal either. Website, www.tannersystems.com. Hey, thanks for letting me tell you about the Tri-Fluid Injector, and we look forward to working with you. Have a great day.